All right. And I think, could be wrong, I don't have confirmation on the YouTube page yet because I have started off over in StreamYard, but it looks like yes, we are live. Welcome back to another edition of the Mind Your Biz Creator Highlight. On today's issue, I've got something that's kind of a more rare treat. Don't always get to do this, but I've got with me a documentary filmmaker, somebody who, if you've already checked out the description of this video, you've already looked at some of the accompanying tweets or some of the other accompanying social media promotional materials and content, you already know is dabbling in an area that's very, very controversial, a little outside of their comfort zone, crypto, and a little outside of what I normally feature on the show, which is people who don't work full-time in crypto. Without further ado, I'm going to bring on Patrick Moreau, the co-director of the Highest of Stakes documentary. Patrick, welcome to Mind Your Biz.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Likewise. This is a blast being able to get this arranged. I'm going to ask for the audience while we're both on screen here, and I apologize because I'm going to make my pain your pain, Patrick, because this is we mentioned this is kind of like the YouTube equivalent of fundraising for a documentary or of fundraising for the next idea or grant writing. I'm going to ask the audience, go hit the like button, share this over on social media, make a comment, be engaged, and do the things that you know will help YouTube view this as an important interview. I think it is, and maybe I'm taking liberties here, but I think Patrick thinks this is an important interview too. So,
hey, sharing is caring, my friends. Let's show Seth the love, take an action, make this shit happen. Let's do it. Let's do it. This is going to be a good show.
Definitely appreciate you all for doing that. And while we wait for you to take some of those actions, I'm going to run an ad from our sponsor, the Shack Shaker.
Body power that you can shake? What could be next? Shack Shaker, Chameleon Fitness, Flabby Buster BM. It's time to get jacked with Shack's Whack Jacker Chameleon. Stout your abs, midsection, nipple area, flabby buns, belly button, horse face, and pencil legs. This big man shakes his Shack Shaker Chameleon like a cobra strikes his prey. Take your muscles to the cobra shake level. Shack the big man way with the Shack Shaker Chameleon. Blast your Shack Jack, attacking your back, neck, and hard to reach groin areas. Gain over 5,000 pounds of pure muscle with the Triple S. Blast it. Shake it up. Shack Shaker Chameleon BM. Shake 2 Shack Shakers for a Shake Shack Shaker of a Shack time. Shack Shaker Chameleon Fitness Flabby Buster BM. I nurture my skin.
Shack Shaker Chameleon. Available at Larrabee's, Yarn Mart, Fang Stop, and Toothtown. Get yours today.
Well, definitely appreciate y'all for helping us pay the bills. And if you go to that site, shackshaker.online, there is a donation address for today's interview. Without further ado, Patrick, let's talk about the Highest of Stakes movie. So, as you know, AI is taking over, and it's going to, as you noticed from earlier, going to handily replace all of us, but especially filmmakers. What's your response to that?
I think that our perspective is the strongest lens we'll ever attach to a camera. And so I use and view AI as a tool to make me stronger. I think what it's going to do is eliminate and raise the bar of average. Like, you know, what was average last month is now way up here. And you're seeing, you know, kids able to create content that can compete with people who've been doing it for decades. So that doesn't scare me. That excites me because now we have tools to raise the bar, to challenge our thinking, to push us further. But if you're looking for a shortcut, if you're looking to like take it easy, well, I mean, it's kind of game over. You know what I mean? Like that's what's at stake. But I love it because those that have something to say, these tools just help you say it better and reach more people.
That's amazing. Okay. And also, clearly, the Shack Shaker is not a real sponsor of today's show. For anybody who's watching and wondering what's going on there, it's literally just a landing page that I created so that if you feel so inclined to donate to the Mind Your Biz channel for today's interview or for other media, you can do that. But I just feel like in a world where the sky's the limit, Patrick, I think it's really boring to just stick with reality unless you find a very interesting subject. And this is where I wanted to talk to you about the sort of origin story of deciding that you even wanted to take on this project at all. What did that look like? I mean, sorry.
Yep.
Maybe rewind a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Who the hell was Patrick before you started doing this movie?
I mean, we were the lead storytelling partner for a small hotel chain called Four Seasons. And so we, you know, traveled to 30, 40 countries around the world, and we were doing a lot of films for them, national campaigns and smaller kind of stuff like that. We were commercial filmmakers who every couple of years we kind of do a documentary, and we're trying to move towards doing our own work, right? That classic, wanting to do our own work instead of client work. And that's when we got pitched the story of Richard Hart and Hex. And man, the first thing I saw, dude, top hat, red velvet curtain, and it just came up on my text message, and it was like, hard pass, bro. Like I didn't even click the thing, because like when you're a filmmaker, I get pitched in Uber rides. You know what I mean? Like, oh, can I show you my script? Can I? And so like a text message coming in with the classic Richard Hart look, it was like, no, thank you, man. We're good.
Got it. Okay, so you saw this heavily branded guy that might be a self-proclaimed this or a self-proclaimed that, and you were wondering, okay, why aren't we seeing his press somewhere else? Maybe that's kind of to unpack that gut reaction that you had.
I mean, it was just over the top, and I think when you first dive in, it wasn't like, oh my God, like I love this guy and I want to know more, right? Like he's a very strong personality with very strong opinions, and so then it's like, why does this guy matter more broadly? And that's where I started getting more messages going like, I just retired my grandma. Like this person just did this, like shit that like, remember, I'm not in crypto at this point. So this stuff is just like bananas to me. I don't know this world. I don't know how this works. It's all, I know of it, but now I've got a friend that I know saying that this man in the top hat and the velvet has changed everybody in his life. And I'm like, okay, now like I should probably look into this a little bit more. And so started to do some research.
Got it. Okay. So it did require a little bit of that third-party validation, other people chiming in and telling you like, no, this guy's a real deal. And you heard a few stories of that. Roughly how many of those stories did you hear that were of the tenor of like, I retired my grandma. I bought, the family farm back or whatever.
I mean, we only heard a couple, and to be totally transparent, this was a pass, and we were taking a call so that he would stop texting me, my friend. Like he wouldn't leave me alone. And so I was like, look, dude, we'll take a call. Now, like the irony of that, like knowing that Richard Hart, what his net worth could be, like all of that kind of stuff. We didn't know any of that at the time. But it was like, look, you arrange a call, we'll take the call, we'll see how it goes. Because usually that's where things die. Like you get pitched ideas and then you give anybody a deliverable and they don't show up. And a week later, he follows up and he's like, okay, I got it set up. You got to go download that, blah, 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 do all these things. But we got on the call, and that's when you're like, oh, shit, this is the Tiger King of crypto. Like this dude is running 1,000,000 miles an hour. Love him or hate him, he is the definition of character.
Yeah, no, 100%. There's definitely that outward projection of character. And I think that's where some people who are maybe critics, right, or who are skeptics would say like, is this all an elaborate act? And I'm curious. You've spent probably more time with Richard than almost any single Hexagon has in terms of just one-on-one time.
More time than his mother in the last couple of decades, I'd guess.
I didn't know that, but I mean, every family is a little different, right? So with the Hexagons, though, who've been like desperate and interested in trying to push into his personal space, right, his personal bubble, you were the one that was like, yeah, no, I don't even want to do this. And then it happened. And, lo and behold, you're spending all this time around him. What's been your take on that? Is it a projection, or do you feel like it's the genuine article? Is this the guy that, everybody sees on YouTube and at events, or did you find something else?
I don't know that Richard Hart knows who he is. That's my take. So what's reality? I mean, reality is malleable, and perception is reality. And he's a master at creating a perception. And he is very smart at marketing and strategy, right? And you over the past couple of years, everybody's seen those shift. But what's been very interesting is the off-camera conversations about, what do you want for yourself? Where does this go? Dude, are you actually happy? Like you got all this shit. You could walk away. Are you actually happy? Like having those completely, you know what I mean, away from film, camera, documenting, and challenging him on that, where he'd be like, no, I'm not. It's like, okay, well, and then it goes back to the like glory. I want to be the king of the world, and those kinds of debates that you would see, in my opinion, that he's still figuring that out. Like that he is really figuring out who he is. You know what I mean? I think we're clear on what he wants. The glory, the number one, the all of that. But the form that takes and who he wants to be known for as like a person and go down in history, I don't think that answer is solid in his mind yet.
Okay, amazing. And it sounds like you did, by virtue of the fact that you were there in his personal bubble, you were able to catch a glimpse of that. How much of that do you feel like comes out on the screen? Not your hot take just now about like your personal take on it, but just how much do you think of that could be revealed on the screen for a viewer to kind of decide for themselves?
I believe that this is the kind of film that you could watch 3 or 4 times and learn more about the cult that is Hexicans, which I say with no judgment. I say like an anthropologist studied it and it meets the criteria of, you know what I mean? And there's a great adoration by those inside the space for Richard, as well as who Richard is and everything else. Like there's a lot in the movie when you bring a fraud investigator, a crypto professor, the founder of Nomics in Clay Collins, and Richard Hart together. Like a lot of it goes over people's heads in the first or second viewing. But this idea of who is he and how much do we trust him and, what is he really like? Like a lot of it's there. But like you don't get it on the first viewing. As an example, in his living room at the time of filming, I don't know if it still exists. You could turn on haze, lasers, a fog machine, and he had a stripper pole, and it would turn into a nightclub. Like it would turn into a full-on nightclub in his living room, right? You will see that in the movie. Now, you have to really pay attention to get that it's the dude's living room. Because when you're filming it, you're like they've gone out. You know what I mean? Like it's that otherworldly. So I love that as a filmmaker, but also it is one of those things that like there's a lot there, but I don't think people are going to get it on the first viewing.
Got it. That that just tells me that you're accomplished at your craft. That doesn't tell me necessarily what you saw while you were in production. That tells me you're accomplished at your craft.
I can tell you, we saw the man in his underwear more than we would have liked. Because when you're filming with him, you need to remind him often, what are you doing that day? Or what are you doing in the next hour? Usually it would be like minute by minute. And then you just have to show up to like make sure he's awake and then remind him what's happening. And often there'd be very little clothes on. And so that was just our routine. You have to be like, Richard, we need to put on clothes now. And he would never mind, but like he also didn't mind not having them on. And so you're like, we're bringing out the cameras now. We're going to need to start doing this. But it tells you how comfortable as well, right? Like how embedded we were, where we would just come and hang out and be like, okay, remember, this is what we're doing today. And, that sort of thing. Like we would, he'd be like, great, go in the closet. Tell me what you want me to wear. We're like, we want like, you do you, man. He's like, no. Like, just go pick out something. And it was more than anything, just delegating. Like, I don't care. Go in my closet. Tell me what to do. But like, that's how close and kind of really in his world, I feel like we were for 3 to 6 months. Like, well, we were really in the meat of principal production.
Got it. Okay. So all right. So in the moment, you had a lot of opportunities to sort of live in the moment. I want to thank all the Hexicans, by the way, who've come out to support us while we're having this conversation live in the chat. Thank you so much for being here. I see a bunch of, I see Matty Allen, a notable Hexican, a really good guy, known good actor. C3 Works, Crypto Hexplained, Nerd Girls there, of course, Hex G Unit. Kevin Hawthorne from Lakeland, Florida, who in my mind is an equally powerful person. He just does things in a very different way. He's not a member of the Hex community, but just a good upstanding citizen of Lakeland, Florida, and a few others as well. Thanks so much for being here while we're having this conversation. What I'm hoping we can do, Patrick, is go back a little bit too. And what I want to know is during that 3 to 6 months that you were so deeply entrenched in Richard Hart's world, right, and in his space, how much do you feel like you had an opportunity to really delve into his past? Because many people just see that there's this sort of this gap, and he
Mhm.
came back a bit reinvented, right? He reinvented himself sometime around the start of his current YouTube channel,
Yeah.
where he began giving inspirational messaging, and you can even see there's a certain quality to
There are
him.
many phases of Richard Schuler / Hart.
Yes, and so I'm wondering is before that, there's a little bit of gap, right? Bit of an employment gap. How was he employing his time, right? And then you go farther back, and it's no big secret. He's talked about this again since then, but others have done research and talked about his time in Panama, his early years in Florida when he was still working on email marketing, which if you know that whole scene, like uncontroversial at the time. But how much did you talk to him about that time? His former engagement. I'm sure you're aware he was engaged for a time. Tell us about.
Dude, I mean, we hired investigators, right? Like I mean, we're not doing our job if we don't. And the thing we always was transparent with Richard. Like we told him what we were doing. Everything was above board. And if he had any requests for us, like we honored those. In terms of like, for example, we would not go to his mom or his dad without aligning with him. You know what I mean? Like we're not the kind of filmmakers just show up to his parents' house and like blitz them and all of a sudden try and start talking to them. But we definitely dove a ton into that. There was this interesting process of him opening up to us, and part of that I think was him, getting to know us and getting comfortable. But then there's also like a trying to teach him storytelling almost, which some people are going to think is crazy because the guy streams for 8 hours and he's a great public speaker and he believes he's the best debater out there in the world. And I do,
but I don't know if you can tell a story.
Here's what he's the master at: externalizing. And so like whenever you ask him a question about himself, he's very good at taking it and bringing it out and making it about something else, making it into this, metaphor or analogy or something else. And so we would develop a game where he'd get buzzed. Like, because one, he loves gamification and he likes to win. And so like as an interviewer, like I would buzz him if he was externalizing. Very simple. Richard, your mother had schizophrenia. That shit must have been hard. That must have been like, I want to know. And all of a sudden he'd start going off about evolution. You're like, buzz, like bring it back in. And like trying to really, we want to know about you. But over the course of that time, he really did open up. And I don't know if it's these exercises. I don't know exactly how we got there, but we did get there. And, he told stories of his mother having schizophrenia and him waking up to the sound of hammers, like bolting windows shut and putting, wood over top of them. Like real, like hard stuff. Right. And I mean, he even went so far, the dude really worked hard to meet us there and tell the best story possible. He even found his first ever digital camera that was like from the early 2000s and sent us the corrupted file to then recover and get all of his digital photos. So we have like family trips. Like we got, like he didn't even know what was on there. You know what I mean? But it was like, this is the earliest digital record. And what we found, audio ecstasy. His very first, right, like the audio store that he did where he was buying and selling speakers, and really some of the early days of Richard Schuler at the time. This is actually when the email marketing, spam king, all that stuff happens. We had photos of the cars he was building. And like, it's wild to get the firsthand unfiltered look, right? Like this is recovered from a memory card. There's no bias anybody's putting into this. You are seeing how he saw the world and who he was in that moment.
That's amazing. Yeah. So on that note, so this person, right, who you've been able to now witness the transformation of, that you personally helped to, do digital archivist work on, to be able to restore this bit that would have been lost to him and his family had you not been involved. That sounds like a pretty rare opportunity. What I'm curious about is at that phase, was he very open with you, not just about sort of some of the hardship of being, or, an awkwardness of being raised by somebody who dealt with mental and emotional illness, but some of the other cultural stuff. I mean, I don't think that Richard's he's not always super open about his religious upbringing, but it's there, right? It's if you know what to look for, it's culturally, it's also there, that there's a bit of a tribe of proselytizing that teaches somebody like him to become a master at debate, because it's a question of tribal survival. Did that come out at all?
Uh, some of those things definitely came out. I think the idea of sci-vive and whether that would be a religion or like where would that go? Those kinds of conversations were had, and he was always very candid about it. I would not characterize Richard Hart as somebody who is vulnerable in general. I think that we have a few moments in the film where he truly is vulnerable. And they happen inside like 3-hour debates with multiple people where, you know what I mean? Like you're talking Rocky round 11 against the ropes, and he like lets up and lets you in a bit. But at the same time, I say that, and then I also totally respect how hard the dude's life must be, because you live on stream and you have products in the financial space that if you say one wrong word, it gets turned into a meme and you get prosecuted forever. So like you've got to be so damn careful about absolutely everything you say. And that does not promote one to be open. It promotes one to be super damn careful and rehearsed and have your story, like all of that kind of thing. And so it was needing to develop trust in a relationship, right? That like we really want to know you, and people really want to know you. And as we went through that process, we did get deeper. We got into his childhood. We got into, his relationship with his mothers and parents and stuff like that. What we would often do though, is like, if you find a path, we as filmmakers don't want to be emotionally manipulative or just include things just because it's sexy or salacious, right? So like there's a lot of shit that happened in Panama, and we did a lot of research into it, and even Spam King, like Spam King is sexy as hell to sell the movie. Sure. But we talked to the guy who filed the suit. I forget his name off the top of my head, but like the stuff just wasn't coming back as relevant to the central argument of the movie. And so now it becomes a little bit of an unfair fight, and us trying to just throw stuff at him to make him look bad or whatever else, and becomes confusing to the central argument. So a lot of those things ended up getting, Panama does not make the film, because as we dove into that, it didn't actually end up being relevant to the central story, as an example. So a lot of different paths. Some make it, some were determined as like not the central argument.
Got it. Okay, so now I'm kind of curious with all of that. I mean, little bit about me. I won't take much time here because we really want to be featuring your experience and the film. I graduated film school, and for a short time I worked in Hollywood. Very, very short time. So I've got a tiny bit of empathy, like I mentioned earlier, for what you do. It's right. Comparing suffering is not very useful, mostly in life. Like I know you've suffered plenty for your craft, plenty for your art. But where I was going to go with that is just say that what I do understand, and in studying documentary, I subscribe to Michael Rayberger's book in his directing documentary book, his stuff, and Maya Deren. I was forced to do all the theory stuff and read all about how life is precious, and it's more precious than our efforts to try to recreate it on screen and all that. But I'm curious, how much of this do you feel like is going to be 15 other untold stories on the cutting room floor?
Of the film that's made, how many other stories are left on the cutting room floor?
From principal production, not the film that's made, just principal production. How many different stories do you feel like you had to say no to and close doors on?
Quite a few. And we had a lot of very serious discussions as a team as to like, what is the soul of this movie? And ultimately, we had to go back, like, why are we doing this? And why did Hexagon support us? Because there was a donation phase and there was all of that. And so like we feel out of integrity, we need to follow the direction that we've set out. And now within that, and so to us, it was always about the broader picture, in terms of so few people know about crypto, and you try and explain it and it goes over their head and they don't get it and they're afraid. And we're hearing that with executives, like sharing this movie with executives at companies, and them going, wait, isn't this thing all a scam? Like all of them? And you're like, okay, like that's where we're starting, right? And so it was always our goal that like, this is a window into a much broader world. It's an entertaining, wild, grip the edge of your seats kind of story, but then it brings you into the broader space. In doing that, then there's a handful of other stories about, just who the man is, and the idea of how to create a religion, like that you could really dive into that. He has done very well in terms of his ability to create a large following, create deep belief, create rituals, create that kind of very strong connection. So there's a lot of directions there that we definitely explored and had to leave behind.
Sure. So even in language, like you're saying, I don't think anybody argues against Richard having a cult of personality, being a cult of personality, or Hex being a cult of personality, which largely follows Richard. I think some people maybe take umbrage with outright calling it a cult, but you mentioned earlier that you had somebody on your team, on your staff, that literally said that it is. Is that what I heard?
Yes. And now, before I get persecuted, I want to say I didn't just have somebody. We hired a PhD anthropologist. This is what they do. They study culture. And his job was, and it wasn't go in and assess like, is or is this not a cult? We're largely talking about language here. I think we all know how a lot of crypto communities behave, and how they, act as a community. But as part of his research, what we wanted to understand was what is the language, the symbols, the rituals, the meaning, right? Because there's so much about the way y'all talk, and crypto space broadly, and all kinds of stuff like that we had to understand. And so it was the anthropologist's job to interview a ton of people, understand all of that. And then I said, I need every criteria that makes for a cult, and I need a yes, no. Like I just need, you know what I mean? And 5 out of 5, it was a yes, right?
Yeah.
In terms of like, is Hex a cult? And this is in the movie, as in like this debate, this discussion is in the movie by professionals, and you get to hear Richard's take. So like it's wild, and you'll get to see this inside the film.
Amazing. Yeah. So in terms of the semiotics and semantics of a cult, we're down bad. We're down bad, but we're going to make it. That's amazing. So I'm curious, as far as your research into this so far, what in terms of third-party sources or other data points that would help kind of shore up this argument, or the support for this argument, or the support for this side of the film, what did you learn about, say, the cult of Satoshi, or the cult of Vitalik, or the cult of Charles Hoskinson? Did this hit your desk too?
We dove into other communities and other coins lightly as a way of validating and trying to understand how this is different or the same. And really, more than anything, understanding that this is more typical than atypical. The way a crypto community comes together and really, unites around a founder and a product, or a token or a coin. And so that's kind of the level we went to, because like what we need to understand is like, where is this different and where is this the same? And so I think a lot of that really strong sense of community and belief is very similar as what we found. The connection and the willing to go to battle for Mr. Hart feels a little bit stronger in Hexicans than in some other communities. And so, there's similarities and differences, but we needed to validate more than anything that like, this is also common, right? That this is how people can come together around these different products, but it's also how they work so well. Like it's also how you grow an ecosystem and bring in, onboard new folks and how the product grows.
That makes absolute sense. And certainly in cryptocurrency, I think most people's experience is that there's no credible lone wolf story of success in cryptocurrencies or in NFT projects. That's just not real. There's a lot of fake engagement, but that tends to get weeded out over time. So that's amazing. I'm curious. Got a question coming in from Ivor Bigan, and I really like this one, so I'm going to bring it up. Yeah, he or she asks, curious if during the movie making you guys had arguments, and I don't know if this question is with regards to you and your co-director, or your co-director yourself and Richard. I'd like to frame it that second way. Like, did you wind up having outright arguments with Richard in terms of how you would realize your vision?
Yes. You're not going to make a feature film and not. So if anybody's surprised that Richard has strong opinions, and therefore in working with the man for 2 years, you're not going to have an argument. little bit of a wake-up call. Yes, of course we did. However, we are incredibly well researched, and we can go toe-to-toe with the best of them in terms of storytelling. And so, if we would get into, one of the big arguments early on is like, people don't really give a shit about me and like the childhood stuff and my parents and the this and the that. And like, that doesn't matter. I want to talk about the tokenomics. and it's like, dude, you're speaking in a way that the audience isn't going to get. Like mainstream audience isn't going to understand the words you're saying. And people do actually care. And like, so we'd have to debate, argue about how much of that to give us, how much to go into. And that really did take some time. And there would be debates, arguments over, doesn't matter, should it be in, how do we do it, like that kind of thing. But he would come around when we would be able to show examples and give him science. And my background is in I have a psych background and I do academic research. And so the moment you call his bluff and you're like, look, dude, I will show you the research paper that proves the character identification and vulnerability leads to more connection, which leads to more people actually liking what you do. He's like, fine, I'll answer your question. Like, you know what I mean? Like, do I really want to read that 12-page paper? No, he won't.
It's just so funny because there's so much of the community that has reached out to him and informally said the same thing, but in different words, but more along the lines of like, yo, stop being an asshole, bro. just let the walls down a little bit for like 15 minutes, be real in an interview, right? Like, yeah. I think that's what I'm hearing, but you actually had to bring something that looked empirical to him.
So well, it is. And it was the science. Like we would say in, the science of storytelling, character identification, this is how vulnerability fits. This is the data. You can see the charts. Like, this is why this matters. And like when he saw that we really got it, that this wasn't a gut thing or a fad thing or, that kind of thing, he would open up and he would lean in more. But I mean, that is the way to debate or argue with Richard. Like it's to bring evidence, science, and to be a strong thinker, right? It's not to say, oh, please just do it for us, cuz like that's not going to work. Right. And so we would always be very well prepared with our research and with our background on the directions we wanted to go, so that if there was pushback, like we had source material, we could cite actual here's studies, research data as to why, because he did want to critique story structure and those kinds of things. And, so you'd have to be like, okay, got it. Let's have that debate.
Right. I'm only curious because so in years past, when Richard has gone to live events and he's brought somebody who's just doing event coverage with him, he sometimes hasn't even made it a big secret that he's been hypercritical of their craft, right, and of them using it. As you know, he's not just a quick study with technology. He's also an old hand at using certain kinds of AV tech as well. So like.
Yeah, some of it. His camera skills, man. I've been trying to teach this guy for 2 years, and he still cannot get a fill in a key light right. But I make fun of him for him every time, and he's like, I know.
And let me guess, he doesn't know how and when to use ND to be able to continuously stick with the 180-degree shutter, right?
He's actually better at ND filters. White balance and lighting ratios are more the thing that gets him, and color balance, which is why you'll see him be a little pink, though he blames me for that and the color grading. I say it was his wipeout, but anyways.
Weren't you Sony, were you? No, inject a little more red.
He's a Sony man. We would actually we would have debates around filmmaking techniques, because he would be like, oh no, man, like I know this. And so like we'd have competitions. But it's part of earning trust and respect, I think, from him, because, we'd be walking down and be like, yeah, I'd be talking about something to like Grant, and he'd be like, no, man, the Kelvin of that is 6,500. And I'd be like, Richard, like, bro, like, I know the Kelvin white balance of, daylight. And he'd be like, no, I know what I'm talking about.
You got like a light meter on you, and like,
right? And so I started keeping score. I'd pull it up and I'd be like, look, and be like 1-0, right? And then like we would actually count, because Richard Hart was right. Richard Hart never wins, and be like, I think you lost, right? No, he did get the flicker rate of tungsten lights right, and I got that one wrong. So like there are ones that he got me on for sure. But it was a fun competition.
You were also in his turf, right? In Europe, right, you do have a different electrical standards, so
Yes.
you had something back pocketed on you there.
I will tell you this though. It culminated in France. So we've had this debate the whole time, right? Kind of like tongue in cheek, debating over these things. And I am I run 30 feet away to get this super wide shot. You see it in the trailer. It's the big, them having dinner. And he calls me up to the cable and he's like, I'm going to ask you what lens you used and why and tell you what I think, but I already know I'm wrong. And I'm like, we've gotten somewhere, folks. Like he trusts that even though he doesn't know why I'm doing what I'm doing, it makes sense. Like, it was such a growth moment. I was like, you're right. And then I explained the lens choice and why, and he's like, yep, got it.
Cool. That's amazing. It sounds like potentially, Patrick, you're the closest thing that he's had to a therapist in a long time.
Well, I mean, Grant and I, right? Like, you're talking to me, but this was Grant and I, and we very much tag team and I mean, even our interview style, like, there would always be both of us. So like, it was always 2-on-1, which, makes it a little bit more of a fair fight. And then we would have, a producer with notes and past interviews. So we've got the archive of Richard live, feeding a second interviewer while a first interviewer is doing it, so that you can pull up past things he said, like all of that, to try and make it as challenging as possible. Because more than anything, the more challenged he was, the deeper and the more he would give you and the more engaged he was, right? I mean, the guy is very smart. So you give him a 101 level question, he's bored and you're not going to get anywhere. You fire him up and really challenge him. Like, that's what we knew we had to do to really get, something that you haven't seen on stream and watching him for 100 hours if you're a Hexagon.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So I think I didn't mean to downplay the input of your co-director, right? You shared that title, that line, that production line above the line with each other, right? As co-directors. So clearly you've both been in a lot of work. And I also didn't mean to let you off easy for beating up on your subject. You guys always do this? Do you always tag team your people?
Yeah. Yeah. We generally have a primary and secondary interviewer for everything we do. And from a psychological standpoint, it's easier to come back to something without making somebody feel like they failed. Because if I keep asking you the same question and you're, have any kind of self-awareness, you're going, I'm getting this wrong. I'm not doing this right. Right? Like what's going on? And anything like that takes the quality of your conversation down and doesn't actually get you more vulnerability or a better answer. The moment somebody else can come in and ask you, they can ask you whatever, but it's a new conversation. And so if we would get, not quite there, or like we weren't hitting what we needed to hit, the second person would come in and would basically ask the same question in a different way and would dive in and would push, but it doesn't feel like I got it wrong. It feels like a conversation, which is just key to having it actually come across in a human way, not a robotic. I mean, we have all heard, or those of us who've spent any time around Richard Hart, some of his speeches around like, I want the best logo, I want the best website, I want the best name, I want the like his thing, like he's got the speech. We had to get out of any of those speeches that you've heard before because they're not inherently like authentic or vulnerable when it's the 120th time he's done it.
Sure. No, absolutely. I mean, to his credit, though, he's quite good at doing the carnival barker bit, where he helps it feel fresh enough for the next group of people who are walking by and or who are tuning into a live stream on YouTube. And to his credit, that's also what good CEOs do, right? They're always ready to do some kind of a presser or something. So I get that that's a skill that he's had to really, really ingrain in himself and really drill a lot. So I've got that much, more respect for what you guys had to do to chip away at it.
Oh, and all of this I say out of respect. You know what I mean? Like, this is the people and the time we would take to prepare and how we would approach him, is a sign of respect for his intelligence, level of media training, and the way in which he would approach a debate, which is how we thought of our interviews, right? It's you don't play the game, you play the player. Like, it's that idea. You know what I mean? And like, as you would know on your show, like, you adjust based on who's on the other end. And we majorly shifted our game to go at the style that we knew would engage him.
That's amazing. I want to do a quick shout out to Gary of Funding Jim. and just read out his comment. Thanks you so much for the super chat there. That's a kind way to support what I do here on YouTube. It's not a direct support of what Patrick and the Highest of Stakes team are doing, but I really appreciate you saying this. He says, thanks to Seth and Patrick for making this interview possible. Thank you so much. It's kind of weird. For me, I don't do YouTube as often or as frequently as I used to because I wind up, I've been put in the position of being a senior writer at Crypto Magazine and some other things as well. So I do this occasionally, and it's for special occasions. So thank you, Gary. And again, thank you, Patrick, from Gary to both of us. But it's going to be attaboys for you. It's going to be a little $100 super chat for me. So appreciate you being here. But I can commit that with that super chat, I will make sure that I think you guys are doing similar to how Angel Studios was doing with their film that was recently released. You are doing a buy a ticket for somebody else program, right?
Not in the same way that they're doing it. They've got a more of a technological back end. We are encouraged, like we're low tech in that we have a partnership with Regal, so we can't develop a custom plugin or app or anything else, right? We have got to use Regal Cinema's back end. They're our cinema partner. And so the way in which we're encouraging people is like find groups and groups of friends and family and that kind of thing and bring them to the theater and realize that this is an entertaining movie, even if you're not in finance or crypto. Like, it's just a wild ride. And that's where it's so hard because people do not go to documentaries to have fun, right? But like, I want to remind everybody, one of our earlier documentaries was a story on child slavery. And we had school groups coming to watch a documentary at the theater on child slavery. Like, that's storytelling, my friends. And so it's about inviting groups and large people. And like, is there a local crypto club or a tech enthusiast or a finance where it's like, hey, we'll bring everybody. That kind of way of bringing large groups really moves the needle, gets noticed by Regal, and the more they notice, then they can add screenings. They just did a holdover in 22 markets, which sounds super technical if you're listening, but basically in 22 markets, the film is now showing for a second week. And why that is so damn significant is because everybody who saw it the first week, what are they going to do on Monday? They're going to tell everybody about this crazy movie they saw. And it doesn't matter whether they loved it, hated it, like whatever. They're going to talk about it. And now you have the next weekend that you can go see it. And so we needed a little bit of time in between. You want a holdover. It's a massive win. So to get 22 markets now playing it for a second week, who knows where we go from here. But that is a huge kind of level up.
That's amazing. So I'm going to do two things here. First off, I'm going to put this on screen so we can sort of see. This is the highestofstakes.com. If people haven't already checked it out, please go do. This is something you can do from any market, wherever you are right at this moment. Is check that out in your web browser. Open up a new tab. If you're watching this on the desktop on YouTube, you can check this out right now. I think that it's in the show notes as well in the description, so you can just click that over into a new tab, and you can check this out right here. What I wanted to do was quickly scroll through this site and just kind of show off. There are all these really great production photos here, BTS shots. There's the one that I use for our thumbnail here of you right over Richard's shoulder.
Jeff is that guy.
Yep.
Yeah, that was well done. I like that.
I appreciate that. Here's the thing: we here on YouTube, we're slumming it, right? We're always fighting for cheap clicks. So whatever it takes. Can't go back to prison. Can't go back to complete algorithmic irrelevance. But got the trailer here as well. Apparently nominations for let's see. 5
Emmys. Wins, my friend. We got more nominations. Those are the actual ones we took home.
Oh, snap. Clearly some recognition from Fujifilm, from Apple, 4 Seasons. This is a client list, right? So this is not just recognition, but client list, as you mentioned before. You've been on TEDx stage. You've presented at Sundance, which is amazing. It's a great time anyway.
United Nations. That was the cool one, man. Getting flown to the United Nations to teach those folks on story, like highlight of my life.
That's awesome. Okay, so a lot of feathers in your cap there, and then everything else, the timeline, why it's taken so long, and
no, there's no explanation for that on the page.
Well, I mean, I've got a little bit of empathy there too. It's so funny here in the social media publishing landscape. People are used to instant gratification, right? They think that because you have an amazing 4K camera on your phone, that it means you've got cinema quality production capabilities, and you should be able to turn everything around as fast as you can, practically live stream something, or whatever.
Yes.
Throw something together in a cheap editing app like that CCP, the Chinese Communist Party's app, TikTok. Really, seriously, stuff's probably really bad for you. But everyone thinks that it's like this instant thing. It's instant gratification. But something that is designed for the large screen, man, you can tell the difference when somebody takes shortcuts there. Even just compressing things incorrectly, not handling their media correctly, it shows on screen. So,
and when you get into like a custom composed soundtrack and you start doing a work back, you realize, okay, so that means you need a finished film for a composer, because like they're composing it to the frame, right? They're designing what instruments and elements, and it's rising and falling as the picture, moves. So now you've got to finish the film and then let the composer do their work. Well, another team is custom designing sound beds, sound effects to like bring things to life when there wasn't actually, sound on camera or anything else. And you've got another team that created a custom look that's getting applied to the film so that it's consistent throughout and enhances the storytelling. Like that's a quarter, like 3 months just there, and just getting everything done. It does take a long time to do it well and to do it at this level for sure. The one thing that I love is that since we got a theatrical release, when y'all get to see it in the theater, you're going to feel it and you're going to know why. Like you're going to feel good about the time we took. You're going to feel good about the orchestration, about the color, about the sound. And it's like, okay, here we go. Like it feels polished and it hits you in the chest when you watch it in a theater.
Amazing. So you mentioned the screenings also, you got that holdover with Regal in 22 markets and maybe counting, maybe growing. That may have grown since the last time you did an interview. Is that right?
So basically, if they start hitting over about 50% occupancy, they can hold it over again. So that if the next week books over half, they could then do a whole other week. And as of this morning, New York City, Corona, California, Dublin, California, Orlando, and Tampa are all sold out. Like, this is a documentary for like a blockbuster, a Top Gun Maverick, a Barbie. Like, no big deal that a couple markets are sold out. Documentaries going straight to theater, selling out like this is not common, which is just a huge thank you and kudos to the Hexagon community and anybody in the crypto community who is supporting and sharing this story, because it's amazing to show, what can happen when people come together and rally behind something like this.
Amazing. So let's dig a little more into some of the things that you learned while you were in production, while you were spending this time around Richard Hart, while you were looking for, like you said, that sort of the soul of the movie and trying to figure out and decode what was really there versus what was just apparent as you were shooting. So we talked a little bit about a third party, right? Telling you, right? Gosh, I'm at a loss for words here. It's not always that common, but so you had somebody outright say, yes, the Hexagon community, probably a cult. Probably, definitely 5 out of 5. No, actually, it's 100% cult.
Yeah.
What other revelations hit that, without giving spoilers in the film, what other revelations hit that for you were like, didn't really think that would be sort of a sidecar to this journey, but damn, there it is.
That even the most brilliant minds in crypto cannot explain it in a way that most people will understand. So crypto professors struggled, in the movie. Richard Hart, we'd be on take 4 or 5 where it'd be like, explain to me how Hex works as if I am 10 years old. And we'd be on like version 5 and it'd be like, dude, you're still at a university level. Like we are not even close. Like, you know what I mean? Like you cannot be bringing in these economic laws and like a 10-year-old doesn't get that. So that was a big challenge and a revelation. Like one, how complicated this really is when you get into what's actually happening on chain. And, the difference between a token and a coin and forking and like all of that, like it's It's really darn complicated. Now,
Sure.
how much do you need to get to follow along the story? And how can we explain it to you in a way that is that an average audience is going to actually understand? That was a continual revelation and challenge, and all of that kind of thing, trying to bring it down. And we kept, as we did focus groups and everything else, it's like it's still going over people's heads. Like they're still not, like, we're having a conversation with somebody who knows nothing about crypto with a professor whose job is to teach new people about crypto. Still not. Right? So it's just like it's a really damn hard space. So that was definitely one revelation, is us learning about it, going how complicated, and then like where do we need to actually go? I think the other part is around, we did this film in Richard's outrage phase, if you will. And so, part of the revelation and diving into that a lot more is how strategic that was. Like, as you would have debates with him about why he's doing it and the pluses and the minuses and everything else, he was very aware, and it was very strategic, and I think it was in Iceland. It doesn't make the final movie because it's a little too long-winded. But I remember on camera asking him, like, Richard, you're doing all this shit, like going and buying millions of dollars of stuff and walking down the street and trolling people all over the place. Like, what percentage of people do you actually think are going to like you when they watch the movie? 80, 5%, but, and it was around 5%, I think, at the time, is what he had said. 5% of the people actually like the movie. And this is a guy who wants glory and wants people to love him. So it's like, okay, so is that not a problem? But his math was, well, yeah, but if millions more that wouldn't have known me, and y'all have heard this argument before, then I get 5% of that new audience. And so like the revelation was how far he had gone with that strategy, how much he had really thought it through, and how much he was just willing to leave it all on the line, like to do what needed to be done, to play the role, to do the character, to do the thing, to build the ecosystem. So that was interesting, wild, a revelation. Nice to see that there was more to it. You can hate it all you like, but the thing that always struck me is like what some of us dislike about him in the outrage phase is like what we dislike about us as a culture. Like he's making the stuff that plays to the algorithm and gets all the likes. If we stop liking it, he stops making it. So to dislike his behavior, we've got to like look inside at we're the ones that are sharing and commenting and flocking to this stuff, yet we want to demonize him for making it. I do think there's a broader cultural kind of thing there that like he's playing into our hands in terms of what will people actually watch. So there's a lot of revelations around that.
Got it. Okay. So that's amazing. And I mean, totally agreed, right? The fault isn't in our stars, it's in us, clearly. And that hasn't changed in a long time. But we have shinier stars now, I guess, to look at. But let me ask, as far as those, the second, that first element that you talked about there, crypto just being so complex that it's nearly unpalatable for a general audience or for a new person, that it's really difficult to onboard people. With that experience that you had, having maybe not coach Richard all the time, but having just remind him like, hey, like dumb it down more or adjust it even more, or, think of this avatar that's 10 years old, or think of grandma or whoever. Do you think you would work in the crypto ecosystem again? Has it been a turnoff, or like, what's your takeaway from all that?
I mean, we wouldn't be against doing more work inside the crypto space, but I would say part of what really excites us as storytellers is entering new spaces, because that's the magic of storytelling. Storytelling is a skeleton key that can unlock any door and bring you toe to toe with somebody talking about and learning from some of the greatest minds of our time. And so this has been an unbelievable journey, and we have gotten a masterclass in hex and crypto and building a cult. Like, so much in learning, how all of this works. That, yeah, certainly we would, but like what's more exciting is to go into a space that we know nothing about, like we did coming into this, because that expands your worldview. That is more challenging, right? And that's a little bit more exciting. So it hasn't turned us off, but we generally, I never would have thought I would have done a movie on child slavery as an example, right? But like we had to become experts to do that story. Did not want to go and do another one after. Like super heavy, super dark, super depressing. And it's like, okay, so now like a different space.
Got it. Yeah. So let me bring something up that's a bit of a comment, and it's not, I don't think they framed it as a question, but I'm going to. Let's see. Trekker49, NC Southbound says, I had to hear this because I haven't met one angry person. Now, I think that's in reference to Hex or to Richard, that they haven't, and I'm not sure if that means, the non-representative sample of their personal friends and family or what. I don't know the full frame.
Haven't met one angry Hexican?
Right. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you just have to go on Twitter for a day. I mean, this is definitely, Hexicans are very friendly, but they love drama. Like, just read Twitter.
So I'm kind of curious. Let's qualify a little bit. Let's unpack that just a little bit. So they love drama. What does that even mean? What do you mean Hexicans love drama?
I think that there is a lot of passion and there's a lot of identity tied up inside of this space and this token. And when you get into a bear market and you get into these places, that's just going to exacerbate it. And when you have a product that is hard to understand in a space that's hard to understand, not everybody is going to fully get and grab. Some people are going to do it because their friend did it, or because 5 of their friends did it, and all of this kind of stuff. And so I do think that there is a lot of opportunity, and there's a perfect storm for a lot of people to get in on this thing across spaces. This is not just Hexicans, right?
Yeah. So is it fair to say that by Richard's own assessment, that he's expecting about 95% of all people who see this movie to be angered by it, or at least to not like him?
Oh, got you. I think that that you're going to have a much closer ratio. Off the top of my head, I'd probably say 35%. A third are going to, and it's going to be a lot of your personal values. You know what I mean? Like if you identify with an alpha male and the way he presents and everything else, like there's a good chance that you're going to watch this movie and you're going to like him. You bring your own biases to the seat that you have. And it's been wild because we brought groups of people in and that don't know him, and you will have some that come out that like want to know so much more and are really enamored by the space and potentially Richard. And then you'll have others that are like, no, thank you. But I do think that goes back to a value system and whether or not you connect with who he is and all of that, which you do see inside, Hexicans very much do. And largely really appreciate who he is and how he presents himself. Those that have that same value system are going to come out of the movie and likely love him even more. Because, we took him to the mat with a fraud investigator and a crypto professor and all these other people. I'm not going to give away where the movie goes, but it's a really good debate. And you get to see where that goes.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. No spoilers, obviously. I'm kind of curious, and we'll kind of wrap things up in just a minute here. Again, thank you to Funding Jim for submitting a super chat in addition with the comments or questions that he wanted me to read on screen. But we will ask the community that's watching right now to bring up any other questions they might have, and I'll selectively look through some of those. And if Patrick already has the video running, then maybe he can cheat a little bit too and cherry pick stuff that he likes. But I'm kind of curious with all of what you just laid out there, and there being kind of a rough breakdown of people and their value systems, what they bring to the film. It kind of becomes a mirror of them, and not even so much just what you're showing them. Do you feel like the film aside, because it sounds like you guys did a bang up job. Obviously, you're pros. You've delivered phenomenal work in the past. Your track record speaks for itself. There's no way that you would have fumbled this. But as far as Richard himself, do you think that influence of him doing the outrage marketing and him even saying like, yeah, maybe 5% of people will like me based on the outrage marketing? Do you think that phase of his marketing and that his influence on the world is net positive in terms of people who want to emulate him? Not people who want to use Hex or Pulsechain or his products as a means to improve their financial picture, but people who want to literally be like him.
I think that is very dangerous territory. I love the question. I think that a lot of that, the answer still remains unknown because I like where Richard's heading. And I hope that he's heading in a direction that's coming from a place of self-reflection and authenticity. Like I hope that he chooses to be the kind of leader and create the kind of followers that are going to make the world a better place. And that's not to say anything about where he's come from or anything else. The man has got a great deal of influence, and I hope that he is very intentional with how he uses that as a force for good, not just economic good, right? Like there's a lot more there. But I think the jury's still out because, I mean, in the span that we've made this, he's shifted massively into outrage marketing and then out of outrage marketing. And a lot of that, he has said, is about onboarding, is about strategy. So at the end of the day, when all of that's gone, who is Richard Hart or Richard Schuler? Who is he? And who do we actually return to, and who is that person? And will we get to see that person? Like, will we as an audience actually ever get to see that person, or will this be a character that lives on and play the role that it needs to play to achieve the glory and the ultimate goal that he wants? I think the jury's still out on that.
Okay. That's great to hear you say that. It sounds like as a documentarian, you understand the power that you wield in creating a sort of crystallized snapshot of who you want to present to the world. And it sounds like you've done a very, very responsible job of allowing the audience to keep that door open as well at the end, and for Richard to evolve into the next version of himself, whoever that is. I'm kind of putting words in your mouth now, but that's what I get from you, is that's how you.
That's a very fair summary, and I think that is why we have such a professional and strong relationship with Richard, because we were going to be fair. We were going to take him on. We were going to present a balanced argument, but we were going to be fair. We were not going to play dirty pool. We were not going to, you know what I mean? And there are things he disagrees with or don't make him look the best, but he knows it was fair. And so like we have a mutual respect in that way. And I appreciate that. I appreciate, and that was the original agreement. Like, we will do this, but like, you've got to let us actually take you on. And he said game on, and we did.
Okay, cool. I've got one more question that just came in, and two more questions that are pretty good. I'll kind of take this in reverse order. And it looks like Hex Holderman asks, "Hey Patrick, did Richard persuade you to invest in Hex?"
I will say that the entire movie has caused me to massively invest in crypto in general. Like I personally, I had zero understanding. I opened MetaMask and learned about all of that. And I have moved a lot of my personal investments into crypto in general because of this. And I'm far more engaged and learning and trying to figure out like liquidity providing and validators and like that kind of stuff. I don't have enough time to quite, but I'm getting there. But no, I do love the space itself and have definitely moved personally towards the space.
Okay, awesome. And then last question I'm going to ask. This one comes from Nicole Grinstead, and who from featuring in the film. She asks, if you had to guess, would you say that the film will have a positive, negative, or neutral impact on the price of Richard's products?
Let me say that some of you may have heard of The Queen's Gambit. It was a hit Netflix show a couple years ago, right? About a chess prodigy and a really difficult upbringing. When The Queen's Gambit came out and it was watched and viewed the way it was, chess sales went up 1,200%. There was no brand involved in The Queen's Gambit. Google searches, like massive gains. You were seeing entire industries and companies being revived in the chess space because of that show. So can movies and stories shift industries and markets? Absolutely. Did The Sopranos actually opened up and created more men going to seek mental health because the main character sought therapy? Like, you see cultural shifts when stories are widely viewed. So extrapolate that for yourself. What can happen if a lot of people see this movie? Like, we don't need to set a new rule here. This is how storytelling works at scale if you can get a lot of people to watch it.
Amazing. And Hex Unit offers a little, one of our in phrases, which apparently now you're one of us. So let's just roll it. It says by the rumor. So not financial advice. I don't think that Patrick intended any to portray any financial, legal, business, and filmmaking advice.
I
really
talked about a Queen's Gambit show that I liked.
Right. Well, it's crazy because for us doing public commentary on any of this entire asset class, it is like a minefield for us, Patrick. And well, I guess welcome to the Army, right? Welcome to Army people who are now just involved, right? War torn landscape, but clearly this is what you do on that side of things. Is just make it more personal about people. Really appreciate your time. If there's something that you think most people maybe don't understand about the film or about your work or about what you've been working on over the last 2 years, what do you think is the top thing, and how would you kind of help set them straight?
I mean, the biggest thing that I keep going back to is that, like, this is bigger than Hex and this is bigger than Richard Hart. Like, this story is more than that, because we still hear a lot of people talking about, like, oh, but my friend's not into crypto, or my friend hates Richard, or like whatever. Like, that's like, or I think it was my mom. I don't want my mom to see, Richard in a movie and that kind of thing. And it's like, this is more than this token or this blockchain or this man. What's at stake here with crypto and how the world is changing? This is an opportunity, and this is a window into that world. And I say that because I want to remind people that is a bigger opportunity to invite others to actually be a part of that they don't have to want to invest in Hex or know Richard or like or dislike. Like, that's not the point. This is bigger than that. And that it's a really entertaining story. And so that's what I hope people get. And I hope people bring that spirit forward with who they then bring to the theater. Awesome.
Well, Patrick, thanks so much for your time. I guess the final question would just be, is there anything that I didn't ask that I should have? Because clearly, I don't have as many accolades under my belt as you do in terms of interviewing people. So, like, I'm not too proud to just say you probably know what I missed.
I think you've done an amazing job, my friend. This has been a highlight for me. I love the questions, love the depth, love really being able to dive into it. So, I mean, I can't thank you enough. And I wish there were more Garys at Funding Gym out there supporting this stream, because you surely deserve it.
Well, thank you so much again for your time, for your expertise, and for the hard work on this film. TheHighestOfStakes.com. Link is in the description, folks. If you're watching this live or if you're watching it after the fact, just click on that link. You'll see if there's something that is airing near you, but do so quickly. That is my call for you to act, because it's going to be in theaters only as long as you keep it in theaters. So appreciate you again, Patrick. And
thank you.
Appreciate your support.